Greetings, loved ones. Learning how offenders think and act is the first step in making our faith communities safe from those who pose a risk to our little ones. It is precisely our lack of knowledge and understanding that gives predators their edge. Today we're going to talk about 5 characteristics of child predators. So help us get these messages out. Subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and share these messages with others. You could save the life. So let's talk about eliminating the edge. Learning how offenders think and act, as I said, is the first step in making our faith communities safe from those who pose a risk to our little ones. It is precisely, I'm going to say this again, it is precisely our lack of knowledge and understanding that gives predators their edge. If child molesters depend on our ignorance to hurt little ones, what steps can the faith community take to eliminate the edge and make sure that they don't succeed? Learning how offenders think and act. Again, I'm saying this. That's the first step in making our communities safe from those who pose a risk to our children. So, 5 common behavioral characteristics of child sexual offenders that we must understand if we are committed to eliminating their advantage. So one thing to know is that offenders have many victims, not just one. They have many victims. We need to understand this, that most child offenders have multiple victims. One study indicates that child molesters who sexually victimize females outside of the home averaged approximately 20 different victims each. That same study found that child molesters who sexually victimize males outside of the home, listen to this one, averaged approximately 150 different victims each. The importance of knowing this gravely disturbing information is to understand that those who sexually victimize children will continue to do so as long as they have access to children. It is not just the known offenders that must keep us vigilant. The fact that most offenders have multiple victims mean that most offenders in our midst have never been caught. So I'm going to insert right here. We are always doing criminal records checks in our churches, in our schools, in our communities, with everybody. So that we can prevent a sexual predator from coming into our community. However, people don't report it. They just push, when they discover them, they push them out. And then it can go to another. We talk about how in the Catholic Church, all of these cases, it's because they never prosecuted. In the church, all these cases, it's because they never prosecuted. Our faith communities eliminate the edge from offenders when we create environments that minimize the opportunities of any adult to access any child without strict supervision and ongoing accountability. We also eliminate the edge when we don't get fooled by offenders who get caught and beg for grace, claiming that this was the only child they have ever victimized. I'm going to insert right here. They're lying to you. If you do not file a criminal report, they're going to do it again. And they've probably done it many times before you found them in your ministry or your church or your school or your group. Because the ones before never prosecuted, never filed charges. Based upon objective statistics, the offender is likely lying, which means they are continuing to deceive in order to reestablish trust and access our children. We must report them to the authorities, to be known as a church, a ministry, a business, or community, that we will take down any child predator we find in our midst. That's what we need to be known for, that we'll take them down. Don't be ashamed or afraid if you find one in your midst. They're good. That's what we need to understand, how they think and how they act, and then we need to stop them. Stop them from doing it again. Not just stop them from doing it to our people, but to stop them from doing it to anybody after. And these offenders, they can be the most unsuspected people. Unfortunately, Many Christians still believe that they can spot a child molester simply by appearance. We are most often on the lookout for the creepy-looking guy who hangs out at the park or outside of the school. First thing, all adults should be concerned and take action to protect children when they see such a person. However, do not allow that limited stereotype to identify those in our community who may be a danger to our children. It's not the guy sitting alone at the party that we should be most concerned about. It's the one hosting the party. Boz Tchividjian, a former child abuse chief prosecutor, founder, and executive director of Grace, which is Godly Response to Abuse in the Christian Environment, and a professor of law at Liberty University School of Law, says, "When I was a prosecutor, I illustrated this point by asking prospective jurors, can you tell me what a burglar looks like? This question often helped jurors understand that child molesters cannot be identified by appearance or social status." He says, "In my years as a child sexual abuse prosecutor, I prosecuted physicians, computer programmers, financial advisors, teachers, and even a child sexual abuse investigator." He says, "Our faith communities eliminate the edge from offenders when we focus on behavior, not looks or economic status. Offenders are not strangers." Another unfortunate stereotype is that most offenders are strangers to the child. Yes, we must be vigilant in protecting our children from interacting with strangers. However, it is common knowledge that most children are not sexually victimized by strangers. In fact, one study found that only 10% of child molesters molest children that they don't know. We must come to terms with the heartbreaking reality that those who pose the greatest risk to our children are within our families, our churches, and our circle of friends. Our faith communities eliminate the edge from offenders when we are always on alert, even when our children are around those that they know and trust. Another thing is that offenders often prey upon trusting and vulnerable young people. To sexually victimize a child, an offender will first have to gain access to the child. And as a result, offenders spend much time planning and executing what is commonly known as the grooming process. And we've been discussing this in our earlier episodes. This is the process in which the offender gains access to the child in order to develop a trusting and or authoritative relationship. Once such a relationship has been created, the perpetrator is often free to abuse. And offenders often gain access to children by one, exploiting the already existing position the offender has with the child or the child's family. And this could include family members, teachers, friends, coaches, youth pastors, etc. Or two, intentionally placing themselves in a position where the offender is able to target a child and begin to lavish that child with attention, gifts, and love. And this can include targeting a troubled child, a child lacking a positive adult role model, or even a child who has similar interests. Both categories of access allow this offender to openly target the vulnerabilities of children in gaining their trust and silence. Our faith communities eliminate the edge from offenders when we understand these dangerous dynamics. We keep our antennas up to make sure that our children are carefully watched and protected. We must be vigilant in protecting all children. The other thing they do is that offenders minimize their criminal actions. Boz says, his last name, Boz Tchividjian says, "I recently read a very disturbing article by a former youth pastor and convicted child sexual offender." He says, "Not once did this person acknowledge that his grooming and subsequent sexual contact with a child in his youth group was criminal and reprehensible. He said, in fact, he repeatedly referred to the sexual victimization of this minor as a relationship and compared his actions to the adultery of King David." Boz says, "It wasn't until the end of the article that I even realized this person had sexually abused a child." He says, "This offender was so focused on himself that he seemed completely oblivious to how his crime will forever impact the victim in all aspects of her life." He said, Perhaps he doesn't really care. And he ends the piece by writing, sooner or later, all things come into the light, i.e., be careful because at some point you will get caught. Boss says this article was a sobering reminder of another very disturbing statement from another offender that was recently published by a church. He says, listen to this, our faith communities eliminate the edge from offenders when we don't allow them to minimize their crimes and don't publish their self-deceptive and hurtful words for the world to read. These general characteristics are just a starting point as we seek greater knowledge and understanding on how best to eliminate the edge from the predators who have tragically infiltrated all aspects of our faith culture. Ultimately, our objective is not merely to eliminate the edge, but to make it impossible for child sexual offenders to continue hiding and offending in the communities that should be the safest for all of God's children. This necessary objective will be achieved only if the church is willing to listen and learn. So I want to ask you, are you willing to listen and learn? Are we? A point I would like to make here is this. If we are afraid to publicly bring down and report the predator among us, they will not have anything on their criminal records report. So even if we do our due diligence and require criminal records reports from volunteers and employees as part of our child sexual safety protocol, it does not protect us because no one reported past behavior and the predator is always under the radar, going from one place to another, to another, to another, abusing children until someone has the courage to stop them. According to the CDC, over half of all children in the world experience violence every year. We can cut that down by being vigilant and reporting and stopping and preventing. The question is not if you will encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. Micah 6:8 says, He has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. You are called, we are all called to be champions for justice. There is a way out. Listen, if you're a victim of violence, there is a way out. It's not your fault. Anyone who says they love you and abuses you, it's a lie. Abuse is not love. But most of all, I want you to know you are not alone. So if you are suffering violence or abuse, please reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. If you know of a child or other person suffering violence, tell the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to talk more about the signs of a sexual predator. Until then, God bless you.